Hey everybody, welcome back to the Autopilot On podcast. I'm Scott. John's co-hosting today. How you doing, John?
Dude, I'm doing great. I got my new setup going, so if you're listening on Spotify, click the video and just see, I guess. I'm no longer in the bathroom. It is official. I moved in and we got a lot of fun content today. Like this is going to be one of my favorite episodes we're going to record. Scott, do you want to kick us off? Like where do you want to begin in this kind of crazy tale of we got mergers, we got beef between a billionaire and a CEO. Kick us off, dude. Where do you want to start?
Okay. Well, let's start with just for funsies. We'll start with the Elon and O'Leary spat on 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 X, formerly known as Twitter. So this week, it I guess to my understanding, Ryanair was looking to maybe add Wi-Fi to their aircraft, and they were looking at Starlink, and they came out in an article. So it was an article in Reuters, and basically it started out with them saying they've ruled out using Starlink on their aircraft. And the big thing they cited was twofold. They said, you'll need to put an antenna on the fuselage, and they claim that that would cause a 2% fuel penalty because of weight and drag. And then they said, we don't think our passengers are willing to pay for Wi-Fi for an average 1-hour flight. And that was from Ryanair's CEO, Michael O'Leary. And so then right away, or at least pretty closely, Elon responded on X saying he was misinformed, and that basically saying that the fuel penalty would be marginal, and especially with the short flights, and they're not flying high altitude pretty much. It's not going to be that big of a difference over time, basically.
Can I point one thing out too? I don't know if
Yeah,
you're
go
going
ahead.
to it, but for most people listening, you have to think about 2% when we're talking billions of dollars is significant amount of money. So they will change different products on the airplane if they can create a 0.25 percentile difference in weight. And that's why the whole low cost carriers are obsessed with having really ultra thin seats. It's not necessarily because of a cost of maintaining it, but it's a cost of how much weight is on the actual airplane. And that's how they can fit so many more people on the airplane as well, is because they've reduced weight in these different areas. So these are kind of all different things that equate to ultra low cost carrier maybe not wanting to have Starlink or any Wi-Fi in general. But I digress. Keep going.
No, that's good. That's good. There was a press conference. Ryanair, Larry held a press conference this morning. It's Wednesday, January 21st, when we're recording this, basically saying that he was estimating that it would cost $250 million per year, is what he said, which is, these guys exaggerate everything, right? And so basically, to the way this all kind of goes down is, that's basically what Elon was saying to Larry was, that doesn't sound right. These are wrong. And so I had Grok run the actual thing, and it came up with the Brigette range equation for verification on all this. And it gives this huge explanation of it, right? Which is
Right.
calculus and things that we can't even go into. However, it says the actual drag penalty is somewhere from 0.1 to 0.4% on the fuel penalty, which contradicts their 2% claim. So it's way lower than that.
It's not even the same ballpark.
Yeah, it's substantially lower. Now, of course, there is going to be some kind of, cost savings, right?
Right.
And the ULCC model, former CEO Barry Biffle, Frontier, that's what he always said. Cost, how can we
Cost
cut
is
costs?
king,
How can we
baby.
yeah, how can we cut costs, right? So that's all, and you got to understand there you have this narrow mindset of that's how they look at life, right?
Cost over
So
everything.
exactly. So yeah, so if you look at the actual math on it, that contradicts what he's saying. I'm sure there are installation costs, and there's going to be some maintenance costs that might factor in, but O'Leary was exaggerating. Elon called them on it. So then O'Leary, in a response on this was a Forbes article, says, "I would pay no attention whatever to Elon Musk. He's an idiot."
He's
So
the
he
richest
calls
person on earth, yet he isn't.
and he's also a literal rocket engineer. He is the chief engineer of SpaceX.
And let me
You know,
preface this by saying I'm not some like Elon Musk fanboy, but like to call the richest man or one of the richest men on earth and that has rockets in space, has electric vehicles, has some what's it called? Nanobots basically going into people's brains is one of the most unintelligent things I've ever heard. No matter what he says,
You forgot the
not
Boring Company.
Yeah, the Boring
I mean,
Company.
they literally built an underground track underneath Las Vegas to move
Yeah.
people around. I mean, yeah, it's
So
like the amount of engineering this guy deals with is insane. He's one of the smartest people in the world and the richest person, right? So, anyways, but O'Leary's the kind of guy who's gonna, who thinks he's smarter than everybody, and that's, you know, he's cocky. Okay, so Elon responds to him. It's on January 16th. Ryanair CEO is an utter idiot. Fire him. Get fired. This is where it got spicy. And then he goes, same day, should I buy Ryanair and put somebody whose actual name is Ryan in charge? So he starts trolling Larry, right? And then he goes straight to Ryanair on X and says, how much would it cost to buy you?
ask the
And-
shareholders. They'll
Yeah.
know.
So then he put out a poll on X to his followers. Should I buy Ryanair and restore Ryan as their rightful
Almost 1 million.
70? Yeah, I got almost 1 million votes. 76% of people said F yes. Then we go ahead and he calls Mike O'Leary a retarded twat who needs to be fired, put him out to pasture. And then he tells Ryanair, please make sure he sees this message.
Oh my God.
And so then they, back and forth, right? And he continues to say, I want to put Ryan in charge of Ryanair. It's your destiny. So then Ryanair yesterday put out an official statement saying that they were going to announce a press conference today, a day we're recording, which they did do this morning. And he said, in response to Elon's latest twit shit, he said, Musk knows even less about airline ownership rules than he does about aircraft aerodynamics.
Well, how do you say that?
So in response, they decide they're going to launch the Great Idiot Seat Sale for Ryanair. And so you got to hand it to them. Talk about figuring out a way to use this to their advantage for a marketing campaign, right? I mean, and so they're loving this, and Elon's playing right into it of they're going to get him angry because you got to remember, most of Europe right now looks at US completely differently.
Well,
They think we're idiots just like we think they're idiots.
Think about what's going on with Greenland too. And so they look at Elon Musk, even though he's not from America, he's American. And
he's a South African immigrant who came here and achieved the American dream. I mean,
Precisely.
and anywho, so they're capitalizing on it, and good for them for doing that, right? And in the press conference this morning, I watched some of it. I actually we can try to play some of it here. Let me see if I can get it up. Ryanair held a press conference this morning, and the CEO O'Leary he addressed this. So let's play this. We can comment on it, and then we could talk about it.
Have in recent days, as you'll seen, have run into some controversy with the owner of X, Elon Musk. I don't quite know why he took such umbrage over it. I had a discussion about
ridiculous
Starlink, his satellite system, for about over 12 months now.
Now that he's being publicly confronted with this on camera, he's trying to play the professional victim here, but let it keep going.
All right.
System, it works very well. The problem is, if you put it on board aircraft, there is a cost of that of about $250 million a year, including the cost of installation and then the fuel drag. You have to put not one but two aerials on top of the aircraft fuselage. That will have a between 1 to 2% fuel drag. We spend about $5.5 billion a year on fuel, and therefore it would increase our.
So he's going from 2% initially. Now he's saying 1 to 2% after he's been confronted with 0.4 at most.
Yeah, I just want to highlight too, with what we were saying before, I think $250 million, the $250 million is just a fleet wide and a per airplane, because that would be crazy. So that's kind of what I'm getting from what he's saying. So we'll continue on.
Our fuel bill by about 100 to 200 million. The Starlink people believe that 90% of our passengers would happily pay for Wi-Fi access. Our experience sadly tells us we think less than 10% of our passengers pay for this access, and therefore we can't afford to shoulder costs of between 150 or 250 million a year.
I'm just going to pause it here. I think that's a crazy stat that they're referencing internally, that in 2026, that 10% are going to purchase it. I would love to see that data and see how that translates, even for people flying ultra low cost carrier. One of the things I'm thinking about is, could you lower the cost of using Starlink in that sense? Because it's not like it's going to be per cycle of cost like an airframe is,
Right,
per
right.
cycle every time you get pressurized. I mean, since it's you so many cycles in a day and so many segments in a day that airplane is flying, can you somehow reduce the cost to where if it's $5, I think most people are gonna buy it, to be honest
Well,
with you.
and I think he does say it, but in a minute, but you
Okay.
know, look, in the US, we have Spirit has Wi-Fi as an ultra low cost
Yeah.
carrier, and I don't know what the number is, but I know that, at least a decent number of their passengers do pay, and it's $8 a leg on Spirit to
Yeah.
do it. And Spirit's Wi-Fi sucks. This is Starlink, which is high speed Wi-Fi. People are gonna pay for that.
Yeah.
I don't know what percentage of Ryanair's flights are less than an hour. It's probably much higher in Europe.
Oh,
So
totally.
he could have a valid argument on that, right? Whereas in the US, most of the flights are at least an hour and a half, couple hours.
Right.
But yeah, keep going. Let's see what he says next.
If Starlink wants to the flights fit our aircraft and pay for the fuel drag, we'd happily put them on board. But the only way we see Starlink working on board our aircraft on short-haul flights is if you give it away for free. And like most things in life, if you give it away for free, passengers will use it. If you want passengers to pay something modest like €1, €2, or $3 on our average 1 hour, 15-minute flights, we think less than 10%. I think, and that's even
I
optimistic.
don't agree.
5% of
Yeah.
passengers will take this up. I thought that was a reasonably measured response to why we're not using Starlink.
Okay, hang on.
Elon
Stop
Musk
right there.
actually took great umbrage.
Yeah, he's
So-
acting like the freaking victim right now.
Yeah,
This is insane, dude.
He started by calling Elon an idiot who doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
And right now he's pretending he didn't do that and that Elon just attacked him out of nowhere. Not the case.
And also, can I reference
After-
this? They said specifically we've been working with Starlink for over a year on trying to develop if this is going to work. Why are you going to work with a company then if the guy's an idiot? Again, I'm not trying to be an Elon fanboy, but dude, like, don't come and completely change the narrative because that's not what you were saying. For one, with working for him for over a year in his company, and then two, come at it from saying, "Well, I just don't see how people are going to use it for $3." That's just like, come on, man. So, anyways, let's keep going.
Right. Yeah, keep it going for a minute.
And resorted to insulting me on X the weekend, calling me an
You insulted him, bro.
idiot. I think yesterday he also rounded on me and called me a retarded twat. And all I would say to Elon Musk is he would have to join the back of a very, 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 very long queue of people who already think
All right, fair enough.
twat, including my 4 teenage children. But we do want to thank him. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 million hits on this seat sale. Our IT team launched yesterday, which is the big idiot seat sale. There's 100,000 seats available for sale.
They're
$16.99.
taking advantage of it.
And Europe leads the world in low airfares. There's no airfares like this in North America.
Yeah, there we go.
It's from this morning.
Spirit and Frontier do have like $20 legs.
Yeah,
So there are sales like this. So
100%.
I don't know what 16 euros is in American dollars.
Probably about 18, 20.
Yeah, I mean it's $1.17. So it's it's
Pretty
a
cool.
percentage difference.
Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah, it's about the same price. He's okay. Anyways, continue.
The ex-offices in Cumberland House to present or to give Elon Musk a free ticket. He doesn't even have to pay the $69, a free Ryanair ticket, to thank him for the wonderful boost in publicity, which has seen our bookings rise significantly. They're up about 2 or 3% in the last 5 days, which, given our volumes, is a very significant boost. So thank you to Mr. Musk. I take no insult at all if being called an idiot or a twat. As anybody with teenage children would know, you're frequently called an idiot and a twat at home. I don't need to go outside to be insulted. But he's wrong on the fuel drag.
Yeah, right.
We noticed he was holding a poll about should he launch a bid for Ryanair. We're a publicly owned company. He's free to do so at any time, but non-European citizens cannot own a majority of European airlines. But if he wants to invest in Ryanair, we would think it's a very good investment, certainly a significantly better investment.
So I was going to make a point. I was going to wait till the end, but I think it's an important point now is like you can have all these different feuds and all you want, but at the end of the day, look at how Elon came to own what is now X, right? They basically pissed him off and he said, all right, well, I'll just buy you then. And obviously maybe it's not to that level, right? Because it's a freedom of speech thing on X, but
Yes.
on Ryanair, it's like, hey man, like I can buy it out. And, he says, oh, you need to be a European citizen in that sense. I'm sure there's ways around it to where someone else can buy with his funding and basically
and
control or something.
and that's the thing. But let's say Elon, I mean, you and I have tracked shareholders for a long time now. If Elon went and bought 25% of this company, he would have the power to tell the board to get rid of this guy and bury him.
Yeah.
Like with that, even probably with a 10% share, he would have enough to own that.
Right.
The reality is, if somebody with enough money comes in and says, get rid of this idiot, then they'll have to get rid of him.
Yeah.
Or he could sink the company.
And I'm kind of looking at it from the point of view too, is I'm sure that once one of those comments started rolling, the marketing team, Ryanair is known for their kind of crazy marketing with what they do. And so they're probably like, just feed it, just do it, and just keep it going, because
100%.
tens of millions of impressions are going towards that. So definitely.
I think Trump said it. Any press is good press.
Right.
Bad press is good press.
Right.
So it's the art of the deal thing. They are feeding off that, and as they should be, right? Gotta hand it to them. Their marketing's good. I mean, and the storm it has generated in memes has been outrageous, man. It's just been super fun. So let's see here. You've got how Ryanair CEO thinks the Starlink's gonna look on it, and you see it's a giant satellite dish hanging off the front of their Concorde. You got this one's good. The classic look back meme. You talked about buying Twitter was the kitchen sink at Ryanair. And of course the classic Marco Ruby. Marco will be the next big dog at Ryanair. So yeah, the internet's been on fire with the memes, man. It's been fun to watch. So yeah, I figured that'd be a fun little point to start out.
Oh, it's hilarious.
And a good little start to this podcast and our first chance to use some media to see how it worked out. So
Totally.
yeah. Yeah. Hopefully everybody enjoys that, and let us know if you want some more of that going forward.
And who knows, maybe Elon will end up buying them. Honestly, there's crazier things that have happened in the world, but that'd be crazy.
It'd be fun to watch.
It would be.
Just to prove him, prove that point. So moving on to the next topic, we'll get into a little bit of news we got going here. So I think it was last week or the week before.
Yeah, it was last Saturday.
Out of nowhere, Allegiant announced they're buying Sun Country.
Acquisitions and mergers are in the air, buddy.
Yeah.
It's that time of year, I guess. I can break it down for you if you want.
Do it.
So on Saturday night, I don't know, maybe it was a week ago. It's the 21st now. Out of the blue, or I'm sorry, on Sunday night, we get basically an announcement through an AK of Allegiant acquiring Sun Country for roughly $1.5 billion. Now, the deal is kind of structured with, I think it's $1.1 billion in cash, or it's a stock and cash deal, but they're absorbing about $400 million of Sun Country's debt. And so that's an important part. So depending on where you see, those numbers are going to basically change on 1.1 to $1.5 billion. So the combined carrier is going to serve over 175 cities, 195 aircraft, and more than 650 routes available. That's a pretty big airline, man. So if you think about Spirit, it's really kind of a moving target, with their kind of leasebacks are getting returned, and then some of the airplanes are down right now. So I can't give you a rough estimate. Anywhere from probably 170 airplanes. It could be all the way down to 100 by now. It just really depends on when the lessors are taking back those airplanes. Frontier's at 178 right now. So this would be about 20 planes more than Frontier as of now. Frontier will end the year with 198 airplanes. So those two companies will be the exact same size basically by the end of 2026, just to kind of give perspective on the low-cost carrier realm. So the deal basics to go through it was $1.5 billion, including the debt, and at $18.89 per share. So they paid a 20% premium to buy them. So again, we're not a huge finance podcast, but man, a 20% premium is pretty significant. So there has to be a strategic reason for them to announce it when they did. Whenever these things kind of come out of the blue, I ask, why do they do this now? What was the precursor? And so I actually listened to the earnings call, the announcement, because they did a press conference of it. And someone asked that question, why now? And so they alluded to talks starting back in November. And so if you listen to other aviation podcasts, there was one maybe in September, October, sometime in the fall, where someone from the Air Show basically interviewed either Sun Country CEO
Yeah,
or Allegiant.
it was Sun Country CEO.
Okay. So, anyways, in that conversation, they said, "What do you think about mergers?" And one of the guys on the Air Show basically was making the claim of why can't Spirit and Sun Country and then use Detroit as another base in the Midwest and grow that just like Minneapolis. So, anyways, he basically said that we're not looking at anything right now, but we're always open to the idea. It's really kind of a niche market for Allegiant and Spirit, or sorry, Allegiant and Sun Country. So that was an interesting kind of precursor in that sense. And then they said during the call that in November is when they kind of approached each other. November or December. I'm pretty sure it was November though. And basically said, hey, there was an executive that moved over from Allegiant to Sun Country. And I can't remember if that's the CEO of now. But anyways, there was already very close ties between the two company and the executive teams, meaning that the guy who moved over to Sun Country knew Allegiant's model. He worked there for multiple years in that sense as a driving force in Allegiant. Now that he went over to Sun Country, they were able to marry the two companies up. Going forward, the company is basically saying that, hey, we're going to be based in Vegas for the headquarters. We're going to keep Minneapolis the way it is, and we're going to be able to use one of the biggest reasons they wanted the deal, or one of the reasons, I guess you could say, not the biggest, but was a lot of times in Minneapolis, they have every couple hours or slots within and out of the gate. And a lot of times in Minneapolis for Sun Country, there's a lot of dead space because their whole fleet is going to do the out and back turn, but they're going out to the destination and then they'll bring everyone back later in the day.
Mm.
So, anyways, those gates are being underutilized significantly. And so they're saying that they can bring Allegiance planes and be able to have the scale and do that. And they're also, I think Sun Country is probably looking at it from the point of view is they don't have any orders. They have like 3 or 4 airplanes on order, super small amount. I could be wrong on the numbers, but it might be like 8 airplanes. And so they don't really have any book of airplanes coming, I guess you could say. And between Boeing and Airbus, this could take 10 years or 5, 7 years to even see an airplane after you order it. So there was obviously a need for growth in that sense.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know, Scott, what do you think about kind of the marriage between the two companies? I can see it working, but it's kind of a weird one.
It's interesting because, I mean, I'll preface it with I don't know as much about these two companies as I do other airlines, but, Allegiant is not historically an airline. They're a travel agency that uses their airplanes to shuttle people to and from their destinations. Sun Country has kind of a hodgepodge model. They do have some scheduled passenger service. They have the Amazon cargo stuff, and they do a lot of charter. So I mean, putting them together opens up the whole union for a lot of options if Allegiant was looking to expand their income potential. The big thing I see it from a operational standpoint is the 737s, because Allegiant was in the process of transitioning away from their old Airbus fleet to an all 73 fleet. And they were having issues with getting deliveries and delays on all that stuff and training. And so from an operational standpoint, it makes sense because now they've acquired the 7-3 fleet, all the training facilities for it. They have, and they can just pull Sun Country's training program. And I don't know if Sun Country has their own sims or not. If they do, great. So that'll help them grow the fleet on the 7-3 side as they transition away from the Airbus. Beyond that, though, I'm trying, I haven't seen anything else. There's something in the background that we're not seeing or haven't found yet that makes this all look beautiful and work. I haven't found it yet. I'm looking. I mean, I'm sure they're not going to go forward with the deal if they didn't think it was going to be ultra profitable, but I just haven't seen that thing that makes it pop, like, the Spirit Frontier expectation. Like, that makes sense, right? They're in line. It would allow growth on both ends. It'd allow them to shed the things they don't want, and it could potentially make it ultra profitable, and it would consolidate. That is a big thing. I know that the CEOs were talking about consolidation over the last year. The Allegiant Sun Country merger does do some more seat consolidation. So that's a profitable thing. Who knows? I mean, I think it'll probably work out. I didn't see any negative reasons why this shouldn't happen. I could say that.
I think we've talked about this so many times. Consolidation and getting as big as possible in today's age it's paramount. You need it. Every airline has consolidated basically in the last 20 years. Every single one of them in today's age, except for JetBlue, really, I think.
Yep.
Alaska, United, Delta, American, Southwest, except for the low cost guys, JetBlue, Frontier, Spirit, Allegiant, and Sun Country. And so,
Yep.
in order to compete in today's day and age, you need to grow with scale. And specifically, when we're going to talk about this here in a second, it's all about credit cards. Everything is to do with credit cards and how the airlines are actually making money right now. And so when you combine those two different companies, you have a much bigger opportunity to sell your different loyalty programs. And I think it's another important point to say. Allegiant has basically, I think the wording would be divesting in their Sunseekers program down in Florida, which they did. For people who don't know, Allegiant also made a gamble on going and owning a resort, and they built this huge resort, and it just was not profitable. There's a ton of different issues going on, and so they ended up selling it, I believe, to BlackRock, or it could have been private equity. Some private equity bought it from them, and so they're basically going back to their roots of a travel agency, but also a core airline, and also merging with Sun Country could pivot Allegiant outside of just a travel agency in that sense, and it could make them and rebrand it into something a little bit more in style with a regular airline instead of what they're doing right now. So I think when push came to shove, they knew that they knew that Frontier and Spirit, whether how do I say this? I think that Sun Country and Norwegian had a hunch that there was possible consolidation at the other side of the low cost sector. And
Mhm.
I think if you look at it again outside of a pilot view of what's right in front of us, because we as pilots do a really bad job at looking past the initial black and white picture. You have to look at these things through strategic realms of how do these things look for the next 5 to 10 years? How do you compete at that level and not get left by the wayside? And I think this is a perfect example. So we'll see. Again, we're not going to cover the Spirit Allegiant or Spirit and Frontier thing until we get resolution from that. And so we will know that very shortly. It'll probably be the next episode after this, to be honest. But I think that is a precursor to something else going down the pipeline. And so that's kind of my opinion, man, on this whole subject before we move on. I mean, do you have any last thoughts on it?
No, I think those are all good points. Yeah, they just the big thing is consolidation and growth, right? I mean, that's the only way they're gonna eliminate it. And, if you look at any of the historical charts of all the consolidations, we went from back in the 70s. I mean, amongst the major carriers, there were we've gone from 30 plus carriers down to, he's really got
Five,
five,
seven,
five. Yeah, you've got, what, Alaska, Southwest, American, Delta, United. I mean, those are the big boys that
and
all
JetBlue.
come, you know. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I mean, it seems like they were trying to time it right, like you were saying. They had to wait for a current administration who was going to be friendly to M&A. And so I think we're going to see the M&A, in over the next year or two of the things that needed to be done to consolidate the industry. So more to come as we get more information. We'll share it with y'all. So yeah, I think that's a good wrap up on that. So yeah, this week, I mean, it's been talked about for a while now. It feels like it's been put off a few times, but a week from now, Southwest is changing from their open seating model to their assigned seating model.
I
Uh,
feel like it's been such a long time since they initially came up with the idea. I mean, it's been a year and a half, it feels like.
It has, and I thought that they were supposed to do this last January, and then they pushed
Me
it to,
too.
like, June, and then they pushed it again. I could be wrong, but that's how it's been, and now it's finally happening. And, I've got some personal travel in a few months that I was debating whether or not to purchase tickets on, and I went last night to look, and yeah, you go in the Southwest app, and it's just like any other airline now. You select your seat, you could pay extra for early boarding. They're gonna make tons of extra money off this because now, you know, the way when I went, the option to for upgraded boarding was group 3 to 5 instead of group 1 like it used to be.
Yeah.
So and they're gonna have even more options for earlier boarding that they can upcharge you on. So it is gonna be a positive move financially for growth on their end. And I'm just curious. I don't know if I'm gonna be working on the 27th when this. I hope I am. I want to see what the gates look like for the first week of this. Because I wonder how much chaos and people are. How many people are just gonna try to sit anywhere like they always have. Um, it's gonna be an interesting transition. Hopefully, it will be short-lived, but, the diehard Southwest people, the lifetime passengers, that it's gonna be a big change for them. Hopefully, Southwest, rewards their frequent flyers over the years and gets them, early boarding and status upgrades and things, but that remains to be seen. So,
I
what are your thoughts?
I think this is just another step in the evolution of Southwest becoming quote unquote a legacy airline in their offering. I think it's just another step that they're going to take in a long road of things that are to come. Back in our episode with Jose, he had hinted that he had heard stuff about credit card, what's it called? The Chase lounges that were going to be linking up with
Oh, yeah.
Southwest.
Mhm.
And then literally like a day later, it occurred. And
Yeah.
I think what you're going to see is there's going to be articles. There's obviously, I mean, with how many daily flights they have, probably over 1,000 flights a day. Yeah, you're going to have touch points that are weak in terms of people having issues. Do I think it's going to be long lived? No, I don't. I think people will just move on. I mean,
Okay.
people want to. I think people dramatize things a little bit too much. I think that yeah, they're going to have time to time stories, but at the end of the day, people fly in every other airline that has assigned seating and it works just fine, and
Sure.
people will get over it. And I don't think it's gonna make a difference on their bottom line. I think it's actually gonna improve it, and that's my take on it. I know that we as pilots, we don't want to forget Herb's airline and be like,
Right.
going away from that is going to cause all these issues. Well, they've announced all this stuff, and look at what happened. Nothing. I mean, they're still a highly profitable company.
Sure.
And what I think too is if we look back at Barry Biffle back when he tried to take advantage of doing bags fly free after they made this whole point, and he said
Yeah.
we had to recant on it after about 2 weeks of the sale because he said there was just no it wasn't accretive to margins. It was not good. And so if you look at that, people's how do you say people have very short-term memory when it comes to these things. It's a huge hyperbolic thing immediately, and then give it 2 weeks, and it's an afterthought. And I don't think people are gonna book away necessarily for that. What I
Right.
do think, though, is Southwest really has to come up with some ways to get people in the door that if they're gonna offer legacy pricing. If they wanna go head to head with Delta and United, they need some premium offerings. They can't just have extra legroom seats. Either you're a legacy airline offering premium seats or you're a low cost airline offering something unique about you. And they were unique before,
Right.
but now they're kind of in no man's land. So again, I think that they're going to continue to update the product again, whether that means longer term going to Europe, going to do all these things. I think it's just a complete evolution of the airline into them transforming into a new thing. So that's my opinion on it.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, they need to. You're right. They're trying to transition to being a competitor in the legacy market, but they need to find their identity now. It sounds
Yeah.
like is what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because they used to have that unique identity, and now they're trying to become just another big boy. Um, and they are. I mean, they're one of the biggest fleets in the country. So absolutely. Yeah, so we'll see where it goes. I'm excited, in a couple weeks we'll be able to kind of see the backside of it and see how the transition's gone and I
You're
hope
gonna
it out
see
for 'em.
stories. You're gonna see stories on it being chaotic and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but in the end of the day, I'm gonna be working I'm actually not going to be working during that time frame, so I won't be able to see hands-on. But if you're in the airport, like if you're a pilot, just take a look at the gates and look at the stories being published, and you can kind of check if what the reality of this situation is. And who knows? Maybe I mean maybe it's a complete disaster. I really don't think so.
It might be for a day or two. I
Sure.
think it'll just be Southwest is awesome with their customer service, generally speaking. So I would not be surprised if they deploy tons of extra customer service agents
Yeah.
in the airports to just help explain and reiterate this change to people to get ahead of any potential problems. And they're really good. They'll probably put, notifications out in the apps and emails. I would hope they would. But if any company is going to do it right, I think Southwest would do that. So yeah, we'll report back on that once we see how it goes down. So let's move on to there was something going on with Delta this week with premium
Let's tee it up.
seating and yeah, go for it.
So the next topic we want to cover specifically has to do with earnings season with Delta, and now United just reported as well yesterday, and we're going to continue to hear from American and Southwest later this week as well. But I'm going to start with Delta because usually when it comes to Delta, they are kind of the king at foreshadowing what the year has in store for the industry. They always report first, and they always give guidance for the next year as well. So the reason why I bring up earnings, and usually it's more bland than this, but I think it's really telling to structural changes that are occurring within the industry. Before for the last 5 years after COVID, maybe the last 3 years after COVID, we've been starting to see premiumization with first class seating, with lounges, with all those different type of offerings, even what is it, Comfort Plus for Delta. Those have been very full. Well, Delta reported on Monday that it's the first time ever that premium seats brought in more revenue than the basic economy or the basically regular aisle. How do I say this? It was the first time ever that Delta saw that premium seats brought more money in than the regular coach ticket did. And I don't know if that's specific with a Comfort plus basic economy in their product offering, or if it's just basic economy versus the Delta One and first class seating. It amazes me the fact that 16 people on a narrow body for first class bring in more money than probably over 115 people. I mean, if you really think about that, that is so crazy. And that's the world we live in. So Delta's CEO Ed Bastian basically said that we live in a K-shaped economy, meaning that the high end and the low end are continuing to diverge. And so meaning that the rich are getting richer and the middle class is getting lower and they can't afford to travel anymore. And they're like, hey, we're not going to really see any impact on that because we have a huge arsenal of premium heavy airplanes. And one other point I want to make on this before I open it up to you is they are saying that they're only going to see growth between 2.5% to 3%. And that's only in premium seats. And they're going to be reducing the basic economy or the coach seating offering. So the only growth they're going to see is through premium seats, and they're really going to be flat growth outside of that. And I just think that is a crazy development to see, and we can get into why that kind of shapes the aircraft order that they had later on.
I think it's interesting because I could be wrong, but to my recollection, many, many years ago, before, I was probably shortly post deregulation, I think the airlines were in a similar profit set where they made more money on those first few rows than they did on the rest of the aircraft back then. I believe maybe even back in the 90s or early 2000s, this was similar. And so it's fascinating to see if that was the case. And I'm remembering it, right? How cyclical this is, right? How we went through this, you know, period of race to the bottom. And now we're seeing the demand back up to the top. And, I based off of we could talk about generational aspect here too.
Right.
This younger generation, what's the current generation that's in the workforce now that's in their like early 20s? That is that.
Gen Z.
Is it Gen Zs now? Okay.
I think
I don't know, bro. Anyways, whatever generation that is of that, let's say young 20s, young to mid 20s, those people, I think we've talked about this before. They want that premium. They have that expectation of of the premium experience. They want to be, I think, what did you say Ed called it? He wanted like lifetime Delta passengers. What was that called? That term?
Yeah, Jose, one of our guests, mentioned basically Ed Bastian saying that he wants lifetime loyalty from these younger generation.
Name of that. I can't remember it. But yeah, like they're this generation of younger people wants the premium experience. They want the fancy things in life, right? And they're willing to pay the premium for it. And we're transitioning, from people who were trying to pinch and save on every penny to where, like you said, we're seeing this wealth diversion, and the people with the money want to be treated like they have the money and they want that experience. And Delta caters really good to that.
Yeah,
They make you feel special if you pay for it. And I've sat in American first class before.
it's nothing special.
No, I think it was better, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
My experience on it, they still gave you hot nuts. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't seen that on any other aircraft. I was shocked when the flight attendants brought that out. The meal they served on American was superior to Delta's. I used to, Delta's meals weren't that great first class. As a paying passenger, that was my opinion, right? And so people want that. And I think now that it's in high demand, these legacies are going to run with it. And now there's going to be this fight for the most premium product.
Yeah.
Which will be pretty cool to watch, because we spent the last many years watching the fight for the lowest end product, right?
Yeah.
And so it's going to be interesting to see the cycle rebound. And I think Ed has been really good at reading the tea leaves and seeing the future and seeing the shifting, the changing winds in the industry and getting out ahead of it.
Yeah.
Whereas some other carriers have just been reactive, Delta has been pretty proactive on it. So
Yeah.
I think you're right. When you see them leading the charge, everybody should pay attention to that.
I think one other thing I want to kind of end on with this subject is what Delta does fantastic is at every customer touch point, they make the experience enjoyable for the most part, right? Everyone has crazy, delays sometimes and just chaos. But if you look on an average day as a Delta experience, especially on the premium end, it is vastly different than if you're going to fly, say, even on Southwest, for example.
Mm.
The touch points that they have on you, whether it's the check-in experience, the red coat customer service agents,
Yep.
and getting on the airplane, the level of service you actually get on an average Delta flight, it's very different than if you're on a low-cost carrier. I mean, I think what Barry Biffle said, one is a commodity in a way, and it's not a commodity business anymore. It is an actual service business at this point now, and people want to be treated well. One thing I also think is important to point out as we go through this next kind of year is what does the bottom end do to counteract that? If there is a fundamental and sticky change happening within the industry on the premium and everyone's going all in, there has to be some change on the bottom end, because if there isn't, they're going to go out of business,
Right.
because they need something to be able to differentiate themselves other than just cost. And I think that what you're seeing with Frontier specifically is their loyalty program is really beefed up and there's a lot of value there. And I also think that them introducing first class seating is kind of a tiered system where you can spend on that credit card and get rewarded with it and actually get upgraded on those flights. And that's a differentiator of being able to actually use those rewards and use that status, unlike on Delta, how it's very difficult. And then I also see it where it grows revenues as well. In order to regain profitability, you need those credit cards. And if you look at Delta's P&L, they actually would lose significant amount of money. I think their CASM was 19.1 cents and their PRASM was only 17 cents, around there. So they would be net negative in profitability if it was not for credit cards. Credit cards are driving basically all of their profitability.
Well, that's
Yeah.
That's a good segue into this 10% cap on credit cards that
Oh boy.
they were trying to push in the current this week in the Trump administration. So how you're obviously a lot more versed on this than I am. So tell me how this would affect the airlines.
I think the way it would affect the airlines is they're paid a percentage on every dollar spent in one of those credit cards, right? I don't know what the fee is, but Delta gets a kickback off of every dollar spent through a credit card. Delta gets a fee off of that. And so I think the problem is, in order for the credit card company to make money and the whole system to work, they need the high interest rates and them to basically, a certain percentage of that money is going to accrue interest for an average consumer, thus creating profit for them in that sense. Again, I'm not a financier, but that's kind of my way of thinking about it. So if you cap those credit card fees, now the profitability of that credit card is capped at what they're doing. I think APR for one of those cards is probably 27 to 30%. So you're talking about limiting their profitability by 65%. And so all of a sudden, uh, who do they use for Delta? Is it
It's Amex.
Amex isn't going to want to invest so much in those lounges that they have all over the place. They're going to give worse deals, which then affects the consumer being like, well, why am I paying for this? Or why do I have this card if I can't even convert anything else? So they all kind of trickle down to the Delta's profitability based upon how much money people are spending and how much money they're basically making off of those credit cards, right? Because they're not offering those things for free, obviously.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
so, I mean, how does the game shift if they do implement those? Ed Bastian said on the call that he doesn't think that it's going to happen, but he's monitoring the situation. I think they'll probably put all of their influence in lobbyists. I think it's Airlines for America is who represents the legacies.
Yeah.
I don't see how this happens. I'm not gonna lie. Like, there's no freaking way that the airlines are gonna allow that because it would destroy their business.
Yeah.
It would
agree.
significantly alter everything about how these legacies are building their fundamentals of how they generate money significantly. So I cannot see the Trump administration changing that, even if it helps the consumer. That's my point of view, though. What do you think?
Well, I was listening to another podcast yesterday or the day before about this subject, a non-aviation podcast. And if you look at the reality, it would actually hurt the consumer. And before everybody rips their hair out and screams at me, like the whole point of the interest rate on a credit card is to convince you not to carry a balance on the credit card.
Right.
So what'll happen is, right now the market is bearing this 20 to 30% rate, which is why it's existing. And if the market couldn't bear it, if people weren't paying that or weren't willing to pay that high of a rate, then they would have to drop the interest rates on credit cards. But people are willing to carry these high rates. That's why it's crazy how high car loan rates are right now. And it's just a market demand and bear thing. And capping it what you're going to do is teach people, well, shit, I can just hold money at 10%. I mean, yeah, everyone's going
Which
to
is
start
actually not
carrying.
that bad. Yeah.
It's not comparatively. So it's like, oh, well, then I'll just carry a credit card balance at 10%. That's way cheaper than carrying, a car loan balance right now. So people will put their car on a credit card at 10% and carry that
Could you
instead of
imagine?
12% or whatever it is. That's what'll happen. And that's,
Right.
and so that's is not going to help. It's actually just going to convince more people to carry credit balances because that's the way most people think financially, unfortunately, is, well, what's the cheapest route I can go to carry this balance? Because so many people live off of debt. They're just going to move it over to the 10%. That's where they're going to do it. And so it's kind of obscene and it'll prevent the revenue. Yeah, I mean, I get the whole point of, ooh, the credit card companies are the big bad wolf and we're going to cap them. But it's the only reason they're able to get that kind of money is because the market allows it, or the market not allows it, but the market is bearing it and people are willing to pay it. If people weren't going to pay it, then the credit card companies would lower their rates. That's what it
Yeah.
comes down to.
I think it's really hard for anything like the fundamentals of America, what make America America, and kind of the world go round. It's really hard to change those things. So when I think about credit card fees, I would bet 75% of Americans have a credit card, if not higher.
Yep.
If you start changing the fundamentals of how the economy works, I mean, it's really hard to do that because there's so many hands in the pie in terms of who's getting paid from all those different fees and all those different things. So I just think it's really difficult to completely alter business models like that and force. And I'm not trying to like say, the airlines are this sad kind of thing where they can't afford to do these things now, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to change. That's my last point on it.
Yeah, that's a good place to wrap it up. Yeah, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think these big corporations are going to come in and lobby super hard, and I don't think they'll be able to get that through. I haven't seen a realistic way or realistic explanation about how this would work long term to help a consumer.
Yeah.
It seems more of a gimmick to me than
Yeah.
a real way to solve a problem. So let's move on to the last topic. Boeing, they've regained trust from U.S. carriers
For now.
for now. Yeah, that's good caveat. After many years of struggles and downfall and loss of trust, and so John and I were talking about we're trying to figure out what changed. So you wanna lead the charge on this one?
Yeah, sure. So the way I want to kind of start this topic is to zoom us way back out to the start of Boeing and kind of looking at the perspective on how the company was started in terms of engineering first. The company was founded with engineers basically making sure that everything was perfectly the way it should be. And the finance came later. And so back in 1916, Boeing was founded. The leadership was all in engineering and manufacturing, and it was all over Washington. It wasn't just in one building. And then the physical proximity of all those different people was very close to where the production line of these airplanes were made.
Mhm.
If we look at from like 1916 to kind of the 90s, it was the golden age of aviation in terms of airplane production. You had the 707 in the 50s, you had the 747 in the late 60s, and the 777 in the 90s. I mean, those are bangers of airplanes. Those things are the queen of the sky was made,
Yeah.
The transatlantic flying, the international flying was basically opened up through the 747. And yeah, you had stuff before, but the 747 was the queen of the skies for a reason. And it was a beautiful engineering masterpiece. I think everyone can agree. I was just in pushback from Atlanta yesterday and we saw a 747 fly by us. And me and the captain just looked up and be like, that plane is so freaking gorgeous. And I think everyone looks at that airplane with that kind of regard. And the cultural norms was if something was not correct, you fix it immediately and no matter the cost. No matter the cost, we're going to make a safe and efficient airplane and that's going to be engineered the hell out of. Probably over engineered in some aspects. So that was kind of that realm. If we go into really the late 90s with the McDonnell Douglas merger, that's when everything started to completely radically shift with the company. And Scott, I'm gonna let you take it from here on this part, but I want the audience to kind of think about this though as we go through. Imagine working for this company that was you had all your pride within putting out the best possible airplane ever and the shift that's going to occur with new management coming in and being focused solely on profits and the finances. So I'm going to leave it to you on that, and you can take it away for the McDonnell Douglas merger.
So yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with all this. There's a big documentary on it, and it's very talked about in aviation history. But yeah, back in the late '90s, so Boeing and McDonnell Douglas merged, and that was when everything took a dramatic shift, which affected essentially the next up until today, we'll say. Whereas I believe it was 2001 when they decided to shift
That's
headquarters
correct.
from Seattle to Chicago. And what that did was it disconnected the entire leadership and management team from the reality of the assembly lines. So if you were to go back into the 90s and go to Seattle, the majority of the Seattle area was dominated by Boeing and their employees. Everybody that lived in Seattle worked for Boeing. If you go there today and you go, I don't know if they're doing the tours again yet, but you used to be able to go up to Everett and do the tour of the facility up there. I mean, half the facility is parking lot
It's
because
so
that's
crazy.
how many people worked there. the majority of people in the Puget Sound worked for this company. I mean, and they were all highly paid, highly trained, mechanical engineers, aerospace engineers, assembly line workers, machinists, metal workers. All these people had life skills, they had trades, and they made a living, and it was amazing. I mean, and then after the Douglas merger, they decided to put Douglas management in charge of the company. And Douglas was driven off of cost cutting and, and outsourcing. And this is, I say this a lot, and this is my philosophy in business is it's it's expensive to be cheap. And
Yes.
and this is what happens. They tried to be cheap and they outsourced everything. They cut the costs, they cut the expenses, which sacrificed quality. And what you were saying, whereas Boeing was quality over price before, they did a 180.
Can I say a
And
quote really quick?
go ahead.
So the McDonnell Douglas CEO basically he said this is a direct quote. The goal was to run Boeing like a business rather than a great engineering firm. I mean, guys, this is what we were dealing with the complete fundamental shift in how the company was run. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. No, that highlights exactly what went down. And they started laying off all these career workers, on a individual level. It ruined thousands and thousands of lives and jobs. It was the downfall of Seattle essentially. And because all these people, all these families and these generations that had built their world around this company were just gone. They dumped everybody. So they stopped focusing on quality. They stopped listening to the engineers. It was all about the money bags and cost cutting. And you see where that leads you. They began having a lot of QC issues, and ultimately it, it led to, you skip ahead. This happened in 2001. You skip ahead 20 years. So in 2019, you ended up with, we'll say in the late teens, you started having problems on their government side contract with the KC-46s, which are 767s converted to air tankers for the militaries. And they had quality control issues with FOD and trash and tools being left in compartments as they were sealed on the factory line. And the military had to stop all deliveries and one by one forced Boeing to inspect tail to nose each aircraft. And they still found tons of FOD even after that. The 787, tons of delays in that program. With same thing, outsourcing with, they had all kinds of quality control issues on software, hardware, both sides of that. The 777X, which was supposed to be released 10 years ago, still hasn't. And it might not be released till 2028 now because of, they had engine issues. They had a door failure, just like we had with the 7.3s. They had uncommanded pitch events, just like we're going to talk about in a second with the 7.3s, and which obviously leads to more regulatory delays. This all culminated back in, was it 18 or 19 with the two 737 MAX crashes.
Almost
Or
back to back.
17. Yeah, it was back in 17, I think. Yep. And we had over 300 people killed in those two crashes. It was Ethiopian Air and Lion Air. And a few days after the second crash, the FAA grounded all 737 MAXs. And that was because of the MCAS system. We're not going to go technically into all that, but
You guys
the
could
point
find it
was,
if you
yeah,
want to.
plenty of info out there. Go research it. And that was the final point for Boeing there, where everything hit rock bottom. I was living in Seattle and dating a Boeing employee at the time. And I remember after the MAX got grounded, and I told her one morning, we were having a conversation, and I said, until your CEO steps down, the FAA will not certify this aircraft to fly again. And it was fascinating to see how bought in Boeing employees were at that time, because she couldn't believe it. She's like, no way, we are the best company ever. we love our CEO. He's the leader. He's going to take us through this. And what I said happened is exactly what happened. It wasn't until he finally stepped down that the FAA decided, okay, we're going to move forward with getting these airplanes flying again. And you got to think about it from an outside logical perspective. This guy helped lead this company to the bottom. Why are we going to trust him to continue to kill people?
Right.
To be blunt. I mean, and so they made their changes, and it's taken, 6 or 7 years now, but they've turned it around. And I'd like to, are you able to elaborate on that, on what you think the changes were that finally have
Yeah.
regained confidence?
I think that over the last year under Ortberg's direction, they kind of said enough is enough. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to make clear structural changes within the business. I actually have a brother-in-law who works in corporate in Seattle, and he basically was in a really, I'm not going to say dark place, but he was really questioning if he wanted to leave Boeing over the last couple of years because it just continued to kind of get worse and nothing was getting solved. And what he kind of told me was it was a huge disconnect between the executives and the actual employees. And nothing was really changing. They said they were going to make changes, but nothing really did. And what Ortberg is doing is basically going through and what the CEO of Boeing is doing is really making fundamental shifts with I think the biggest one buying Spirit Aerospace Systems. I think the reason why that one's one of the largest shifts is because they know they have to bring the product back in-house and have their own direction over it, and then also have engineers right there inspecting it. And so I read a report saying that after they've done these kind of processes over the last year, they're basically system to flag things on the production line and be able to say, "Hey, I have a problem," for one of the mechanics working on it or machinists, basically went up like 2,000% almost by people finally feeling the openness to say, "I don't think this is done right. Let's get someone in here to inspect it to make sure that we're doing the correct thing." Because if we look back, and I don't know if we're going to talk about it later, but look at Alaska Airlines and the door plug or the door falling off because 4 bolts weren't installed. That is unacceptable. Every way you put it, it is unacceptable for an airplane manufacturer to have such incompetence through their manufacturing process. It's no way you shape it. And so they're finally saying, okay, have we can't have these orders continue to come in if we do not fix things long term. And it's extremely expensive for what they're doing. Billions of dollars. They've spent $20 billion over the last basically the whole Max issue and the Alaska Airlines things. It's been $20 billion hit for their profits. But you know what? They kept on picking up the penny and tripping over the dollar. And they're finally saying, you know what? Let's reverse a lot of these things and go back to the basics of what this company was founded on. Now, I think that if we look at this latest order from Alaska Airlines, it's the largest order they've ever placed. And, Hawaiian also has A350s. If they really do not have confidence, why wouldn't you go towards maybe they don't have A350s, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I think they have A330s. They have an Airbus product, whether it's the Airbus 321 series, and then they have a wide body Airbus series as well. But if they, yeah, A330s, if they wanted to step away from Boeing in that sense, they had a perfect opportunity through a different fleet that they already were migrating into their system. But they chose the 787 fleet for the first time, a wide body airplane for Alaska Airlines. I think that's a fundamental shift, along with Delta Airlines adding a whole new fleet type, right? So Delta, like we talked about before, is premium heavy. They're seeing the growth happen through premium seats. They are buying the 787-10, which is not the longest range, but it allows them to have the highest premium, basically seating capacity that they can put on those airplanes. I think Delta would not make that order, and they would have went back to the Airbus A350 and got a better deal. But I think that they're finally getting trust from Boeing, and they're really liking the new CEO's stance on the way the company is kind of rebounding. So all things considered, I think that we should be optimistic, but also cautious at the same time.
Sure.
We still have to see how this plays out, but I think going forward, if they continue to put out really good results The FAA just allowed them to increase, I think, from 38 to 42 airplanes per month for production. So the government is approving of what they're doing as well. So I think they're going to continue to build up steam. They're still behind Airbus in their order deliveries, being able to deliver airplanes, but I do think that it's heading in the right direction. And when I talk to my brother-in-law, he agrees. He sees a noticeable difference in those different types of things. So that's kind of my stance on it. But one other point that I wanted to cover too, just before we wrap up, is when they shifted all their employees from Seattle to Chicago, basically they left the mechanics and the shop employees in Seattle and moved all of the corporation, the people making the decisions, 1,000 miles away to Chicago. So there's a complete disconnect there. I mean,
Yeah.
so we just went through all those different reasons, but you can kind of see how that occurred. And what I wanted to say, from the viewer standpoint, imagine being employed and then you realize that everyone that is in charge of making decisions is about to move across the country and the whole company kind of fell apart in that sense. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about. So that is my assessment on Boeing. I'm really stoked on how it's going though. I want someone in America like Boeing to really kick ass. I really want to be prideful of an American-owned company that is producing the best airplanes in the world. And I cannot say that at the moment, and I really hope that in the near future we can say that.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know if you said it, but this is the first CEO in like 20 years who's an engineer.
Yeah.
So that's a big factor.
No, I did
So
not say that. It's a great point.
yeah, it's the first one. So they put somebody back at the helm who actually is an engineer and can, put their finger on the assembly line and the
Right.
realities of it. So yeah, they, hopefully they learned from, I mean, because we didn't say it, but the billions of dollars it cost them to try to be cheap here. I mean, billions and billions and billions of dollars they lost
It's
throughout
so
this.
frustrating.
And it was, like I said, it's expensive to be cheap. It probably ended up costing them substantially more in the fines and delays and shutdowns and reputation loss. I mean, how many orders went to Airbus because of all this?
And how
I mean,
cheap do they have to make their airplanes to get people to buy them? And that's something we will never
yeah,
know.
right. I mean, this debacle built Airbus because
Yeah.
prior to this debacle, Airbus was state funded and struggling and never made it off the ground. And then the Boeing debacle happened and everybody started Airbus orders. And now Airbus is ultra profitable and they're kicking ass.
Yeah.
And, you can get their airplanes. You still have huge wait lists to get Boeings, although now Airbus has enough orders that you're running into the same market, that's probably another factor why Boeing's starting to get popular again, is because there's not much of a time benefit to switching to Airbus anymore.
Right.
So anyway, yeah, we wanted to cover all that today. So I think we covered quite a lot and it was,
Yeah, we did.
yeah, we haven't done a nice kind of newsy industry episode in a little bit. So it's good to get back on that. And we appreciate everybody listening and watching. Again, liking and subscribing and sharing. That is the biggest thing we ask of our listeners to help us out. Since we don't monetize this, just share it with a friend, tell a friend about it, like and subscribe to our channels. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Those are the big three where we post everything. We got some good episodes lined up coming up. We're trying to schedule out with our guests to make it work. So hopefully in the next, over the next month or two, we'll be able to get a lot of those published out. And we appreciate everybody listening and we hope your New Year's going well. Thanks again, everybody.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.